Why do people still make excuses for slavery? I think we know the answer.
Holy shit, MTV's Francesca Ramsey is about to talk about the scourge of modern slavery. What's going on here? What's going on? Is this the Twilight Zone? Have I fallen in the Twilight Zone?
We talk about race a lot on this show.
Oh, you actually have some self-awareness. I cannot believe that. Must be in some other dimension. There's gotta be some other dimension. Francesca from MTV showing some self-awareness. Holy crap.
But thanks to our current election cycle, apparently, we have to go back to the beginning to shed some light on the myths people use to justify slavery.
Whoa. I thought this was excuses. Now, myths are kind of fictional accounts of the past, usually with some kind of supernatural, superhuman element, or to them. Not always that way. Like, there's myths from our founding fathers and stuff like that. They're not really supernatural, superhuman, but a lot of them didn't happen, is the point. Myths didn't happen.
Never thought I'd have to say that. Excuse number 1.
Okay, Francesca. What's it gonna be? Excuses or myths? Make up your goddamn mind.
Slaves were well fed, aka the Bill O'Reilly defense. Michelle Obama took a moment during her epic DNC speech to remind everyone that the first family wakes up in a house built by slaves every day.
Ah, fuck me. This is about American slavery from, like 150 years ago. It's like 8 fucking generations ago. Well, good news is, I'm not crazy, and I'm not lost in the Twilight Zone.
Which succinctly drove home the point of how far we've come when it comes to race in America. She also unknowingly cleared the stage for Fox News host and human fartbag Bill O'Reilly to defend slavery. He said that the slaves who helped build the White House were housed and well fed.
I don't think that's an argument. It sounds more like a statement of fact. You didn't really provide any context, and I'm afraid MTV News isn't. I mean, hell, I don't even trust major news networks when they don't provide context for a goddamn quote. So, why do you think I would trust you? I know it's Bill O'Reilly, but still, why do you think I would trust you?
This argument is similar to some masters treated their slaves well, or being a house slave wasn't so bad. But
okay, I still don't think it's an argument. You came up with, here's an excuse. Well, an excuse isn't an argument. That's two different things. I mean, excuses can be used in an argument, but they're not an argument in and of themselves. And I don't know what the argument he was having was. So, I don't know. It sounds to me like he was just stating a fact, but I don't know the context, so I don't really know.
Here's the thing. This argument is immaterial, as in, it doesn't matter. These people were stolen from their homes and families and enslaved. If aliens abducted your brother, sister, and favorite uncle and—
Oh shit, aliens. Maybe this is the History Channel. Oh, fuck. I just got a little depressed about freaking the History Channel now.
Stuck a feeding tube down their throats while forcing them to build their emperor's house, would you think, well, at least the aliens fed my family? I don't think so.
If they didn't, my family would be dead, and that would definitely kind of suck. You understand that putting at least in front of something doesn't make it good. It just means it's better. For example, at least I'm on top of a shit pile, rather than under the shit pile. Both are a pile of shit. It's just, in one of them I have shit in my mouth, and the other one is just on my clothes. Well, hopefully just on my clothes.
Excuse number 2. Slaves were happy to have work.
Who the fuck says that? I bet you have never met anyone that has said that in a serious manner. The first one he had a source, Bill O'Reilly quote, taken from who knows where. But this one doesn't have a source. Oh, wait. Yeah, it's MTV.
Look, you wouldn't forgo a day's pay just because your boss brought in some cupcakes.
Well, I don't know. How good were the cupcakes? God, that smarmy attitude of you just wants to make me argue with you about everything. About every little point. If you weren't so fucking smarmy, you know what? I bet you do have people tell you this shit because you are so... Look at the look on your face. That you're like, oh God, you're so smarmy. Oh, I just want to argue with you. I want to see you rip your hair out in frustration because I'm being an asshole.
But you want me to believe that slaves were thankful for the racist undermining of their body, mind, and soul? Newsflash, although you might hate your job, slavery isn't employment.
Holy shit. Did the writers check the dictionary and find out that slavery doesn't equal employment?
It wasn't voluntary, and it has no comparison to working at a job. Being forcibly taken from your home, put in shackles on a disease-infested ship, and forced to do hard labor from sunrise to sunset is not the same thing as clocking in at Starbucks, okay? Employment is a voluntary position that results in a negotiated paycheck that you can use however you want. Slavery is forced labor. You have no autonomy, no pay, and are subjected to unspeakable violence at the hands of people who undermine and devalue your basic humanity.
Whoa. I don't think you realize this, but you just defined slavery. That's your definition of slavery, right? I mean, that's what you're saying. Slavery equals this. You do realize that by your own definition of slavery, if you were to treat your slaves well, and you weren't violent, maybe gave them a little spending money, then you wouldn't be practicing slavery. Nah, I don't think you realize that. And I also have a feeling I'm going to be using this definition against you again later in the video.
Excuse number 3. Well, America wasn't the only country that had slavery. It's historically 100% correct.
Well, if it's 100% correct, it's a fact. Not an excuse. I mean, excuseless like trying to say something didn't happen. What they're saying is, yes, it did happen. It happened all over the place. It's not an excuse. It's just saying it happened. I don't think you know what a fact is versus an excuse. I don't think you know what an excuse is. I really don't. I'm suspecting that you think that if somebody brings up a fact, that they're excusing what the fact is about. Like, here's a fact. Fact. I have a car that goes over 100 miles per hour. But that's not an excuse to go 100 miles per hour. It's just a reason for it.
That many different types of people have been enslaved all over the world. Brazil, for example, has a heinous history of slavery, and the majority of Africans in the transatlantic slave trade were sent there. But that doesn't mean you can excuse American slavery by comparison. Even if slavery was common practice when America was doing it, it doesn't make it right. Slavery is bad, and it was always bad, everywhere, no matter who's doing it.
Yeah, and that's why the 13th Amendment was passed. And at least historically, we say that's why the Civil War was fought. I'm pretty sure it was fought for a bunch of different reasons. That was one of them eventually. But, yeah. We know slavery was bad. There's not an excuse for it. But we can tell you things about slavery that are true but that doesn't excuse it.
Excuse number 4. Well, the Irish in America were slaves too. No, they were not. We actually already covered this. Take a look. And high five to us for having so much foresight. We knew y'all would try to use this one again.
Whoa, 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 whoa. That's not true. Oh, let me check out this other video. Just saying something doesn't make it true. So what do you have to say for yourself?
Excuse me. The Irish, they were also slaves. So, first of all, no. While it's true that Irish immigrants were often discriminated against in the United States, many came to America as indentured servants, which isn't slavery.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I don't think you understand what indentured servitude is. Now, according to Wikipedia, indentured servitude is a system of unfree labor where the indentured is bound by contract to work for a fixed period. So now I'm going to have to go over a history lesson to explain why you are wrong. God damn it. Okay, now, most people did not go into indentured servitude voluntarily. The choice was starve, waste away in a debtor's prison. Prison in the 18th century was shitty. It's probably worse than modern Mexican prisons. And last, there was sometimes the option of being killed or dying, or becoming an indentured servant. So when your choices are basically death or servitude, that's about the same choice as a slave. Okay? A slave has a choice. He can be a slave, or he can try to run away and possibly die. So he's got a choice of possible death, slavery. Death frees you from slavery. You can't enslave a corpse. Now, the big difference between slavery and indentured servitude is that indentured servitude was only temporary. Sometimes multi-generationally temporary, so you could be born into indentured servitude. But when it comes down to it, the 13th Amendment in the United States made indentured servitude legal along with the slavery she's talking about, chattel slavery. Basically, Wikipedia lists debt bondage as a type of slavery in their slavery entry. Debt bondage is indentured servitude. You are bound by a debt to work for free. Now, what this is sounding to me like is that you are actually excusing a type of slavery in your video about debunking excuses for slavery. Let's go a little deeper. Okay, we're gonna take the points of your definition. So, forced labor. Basically, labor without being paid for. Well, slaves had labor. Indentured servitude. Servants didn't get paid for labor either, unless the person wanted to give them money. They didn't have to. They were under contract. No money required. No autonomy. An indentured servitude couldn't leave his contract until it was over. Now, slavery they couldn't leave unless they were freed. There's a big difference there. Indentured servitude, the contract ended at a specified time or after a specified amount had been earned, but it could be multi-generational. Slavery was generally multi-generational unless the person who owned the slave decided to set them free. No pay? Yeah, that's pretty much covered in both. Right in the definition. The subject of unspeakable violence. Now, this one's a little trickier. Let's parse this down. First off, as we realize that apparently, according to Francesca, if the slave was treated well, they weren't a slave. For some reason, it's a bizarre logic, but it's the logic that's inherent in her definition. Now, indentured servants had a higher death rate than the slaves did, percentage-wise. And there is a reason behind that. Now, I'm going to give you an example of something that's a little more understandable in modern day. And that is owning a car and renting a car. when you own a car, that's expensive, and when you want to sell it, you want it to retain as much value as possible. I'm trying to make this so it's not as terrible as talking about people, so cars. I'm not equating owning a car as the same thing as enslavement. Technically, it is the same thing as slavery. Cars, just the car doesn't have a personality unless you're Knight Rider. So, ooh, dude, Knight Rider was a slave. Holy shit. Mind blown. Now, here's the thing. As I was saying, when you own a car, you want to, most people, not all, most people take care of it, treat it well, so that when they go to sell it, it has as much value as possible when they get rid of it. The thing with rentals is pretty much rentals at best are treated the same thing as an owned car. But much more often, it is treated much worse because it is a temporary car. I don't own that car. I don't care as much about what happens to it because it isn't mine. If it wasn't for the rental agreement, people would fucking bust those things up left and right. They just don't want to give up their $1,000 deposit. If you didn't care about your deposit, go ahead. Fuck, destroy the damn thing. It's not yours. You don't care. You might ask, well, how does this apply to slaves and that? Well, indentured slaves weren't really used on docks. Dock work's pretty dangerous, especially in the old days. I mean, it was pulleys and shit. They didn't have cranes and stuff. People hauling on ropes. A ship was a place where you could really get hurt pretty badly. I mean, there's a reason why sailors are known to have peg legs and hook hands. Now, slaves generally weren't used on the docks. I'm not saying they were never used, but most of the time you didn't use them on the dock. Because if they were injured, they lost their value. While indentured servants were only temporarily there, so they were actually used pretty heavily for dock work. Nobody wants to do dock work, it's terrible, and with no pay. Now this is an anecdote, but on the Mississippi, somebody asked a slave owner why he wasn't using his slaves to get the cargo to be a lot faster. And his reply was, haha, they're too valuable, let's have the Irish do it. Because, frankly, he didn't care if the Irish got crushed or had his hand ripped off or lost a leg, because the guy was only temporarily a servant. He was only temporarily a slave. Indentured servitude is temporary slavery, has a built-in expiration date. If you survived that long. A lot didn't.
Class, let's say this one together. Persecution is bad, but not the same as slavery.
I mean, for fuck's sake, there are 45 million slaves in the modern world. I'm using numbers given me by Wikipedia. I think it's only proper that I use the same level of research that MTV uses. And pretty much most of them are debt bondage slaves. And debt bondage slaves are also known as indentured servants. So, Francesca, quit excusing slavery just because it's not the slavery as you know it. It's still slavery. It meets your definition of slavery. You never said slavery had to be permanent. That's not your definition. And that's the biggest difference between indentured servants and slaves, is a built-in timer on when they stop being a slave.
Excuse number 5. Africans sold their own people into slavery. This one is also historically true.
Again, fact is not an excuse. Now, saying indentured servitude is not slavery, that's an excuse for ignoring what happened to the Irish and ignoring modern slavery, because indentured servitude is a type of slavery.
But that doesn't absolve European and American slavery or make it okay. It just means that West Africans also have a history to reckon with, just like us, and every modern celebrity that thinks blackface is a joke. And look, all of this is kinda weird considering that most families living in America today immigrated here after slavery was made illegal. And even when it was legal, only a tiny percentage of people ever owned slaves.
Just West Africans? Just West Africans? That's the only other people? Look, slavery was practiced everywhere in the world, for fuck's sake. The United States, in fact, sent Marines to Tripoli to stop the Barbary pirates from enslaving U.S. citizens when they were hitting our shipping. Now, that is a little ironic that the Marines went and fought the Barbary pirates to end their slavery of U.S. citizens while U.S. citizens were still slaves, but it's a fact that happened. I'm not excusing anything, it's just that actually happened. Now, slavery, despite apparently what Francesca thinks, has existed all throughout history. And the fact that chattel slavery, which is kind that was used in the United States during that part of our history, that was only outlawed in all countries on the world in 2007. Yes, that's right, 2007. That's not all countries, of course. That's when the last country made it so that it was not part of that it was illegal. It was no longer a part of their legal system. You can't have slaves anymore. At least the type of chattel slavery, which is what Francesca is talking about. Basically, it sounds to me like you're providing excuses for that, and also the modern practice of slavery, which is prevalent in cultures in the Middle East, in Africa, parts of Asia, and there's even a seedy underbelly in the United States of human trafficking. That's slavery. Human trafficking is slavery.
So why does anyone still try and excuse or downplay slavery?
You know what, Francesca? I think they're just trying to get your goat. I think they took one look at your smarmy face and wanted to wipe that look off your face. And really, hitting a woman is pretty frowned upon in this culture and country, despite what you might think. What a patriarchy. If I hit a woman, I'll be thrown in prison. If a woman hits me, people will cheer. Yay. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're like, well, I can't hit this. Well, I'm not going to say it, what I want to say. I can't hit this person who's got that stuck-up, smarmy look on her face. But I want to get that face. I want to get that look off that face. So you know what? I'm going to argue with her with ridiculous things and just come up with facts that she can't refute because they happened, and argue with her and not stop until she pulls her hair out in frustration. And you know what, Francesca? That frustration is how I feel after watching the crap you put out.
We've got some theories and they cut pretty deep. Many of our founding fathers, and the people most likely to have had the means to have owned slaves, are mythologized as great and pure leaders. And admitting the horribleness of slavery means admitting that white supremacy was an important part of our nation's origin.
Whoa. I'm pretty sure that thanks to you and people like you, everyone knows that the founding fathers kept slaves. You shout it from the rooftops. In the past, they might not have realized it. I mean, they should have if they studied history. And they probably did, actually, because history was a lot more efficient back then. I mean, I can't think... Did they ever not talk about slavery and the Civil War? It was such a huge part of our history that at least United States history classes should cover that. I don't know what kind of school you're going to. Did you go to a school where they didn't teach you about history? Well, that explains a lot. that explains a great deal. Although, really, it's the writers who are doing this. You're just the face. And I don't know why they picked somebody with such a smarmy, condescending air about her. But they did. Well, let's continue.
And while slavery officially ended 150 years ago,
What the fuck? Holy fucking shit. I can't actually believe what you said. You just said slavery officially ended 150 years ago. You are excusing slavery in every country outside of the United States that had it after we abolished it with the 13th Amendment in our own country. You realize that, right? You realize that you're excusing the fact that chattel slavery was still legal in many countries and was finally made illegal on the last country, which was, I think, Mauritania. If I mispronounce it, whatever, fuck. As 2007, before 2007, you could still own chattel slaves in Mauritania. You just fucking excused slavery outside the United States after the Civil War. What the fuck? Well, you know, when you started this, I had a little bit of hope that you might tackle an issue with some seriousness, but you know, I shouldn't have gotten my hopes up. It's MTV fucking news.
It informed the next 150 years of systemic racism and equality that still plagues us today. The blatant forms of racism we still see today, from disenfranchising black voters to police brutality, are rooted in the fact that people were brought here against their will and treated like they were subhuman. That our country has never really reckoned with it.
Whoa. Our country has never reckoned with slavery? Have you ever heard of a little thing called the United States Civil War? In our country, it's just a civil war. Yeah. That reckoned with slavery pretty well. How about the Reconstruction? Or how about the Civil Rights Act? Do these not exist? Do you just ignore them?
We have a Holocaust museum in Washington, D.C. because the world forced Germany to answer for the atrocities that they subjected Jewish people to and millions of other ethnic groups during World War II, and it serves as a permanent reminder of that fact. Meanwhile, we don't have a national museum dedicated to exploring slavery because America keeps trying to sweep it under the proverbial rug.
Yeah, your video is an example of America sweeping it under the rug. For fuck's sake, you are so fucking wrong on that. The Holocaust Museum exists because it's to remember history from another fucking country. Okay? Most history museums in the US that do stuff with US history is going to have something about slavery in them. Any history museum that covers anything in that area of history will have something about slavery in it. Even if it's just a blurb, they'll have something. I mean, there are memorials about slavery. There Gettysburg's a battlefield. It's the Emancipation Proclamation, the place where that was said, is a memorial. I mean, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Next thing you're gonna say is Arlington Graveyard is not a memorial to all the dead people who fought for the United States, including those who fought against slavery. No, they didn't fight against slavery. No, they didn't. You know, nope. No people who fought against slavery are buried in Arlington Cemetery. None. Nope, didn't happen. Ignoring it. Yeah, I know that was a bit of a straw man, but you know what? Fuck her. This whole thing is strawmen. And terrible ones at that. Terrible strawmen. Terrible. You should get some straw back. I'm giving you some straw back.
And insist that generations of African Americans couldn't possibly be affected by slavery in the long term, even though the exact opposite is proven true.
Wow, this is so goddamn frustrating. It isn't proven true. It isn't slavery that is affecting them. The people who you're talking about have never experienced slavery. Unless they happen to be one of the 45 million people worldwide who are currently enslaved that you like to ignore. It's the idea that slavery is affecting them that is causing the problems. It's not that slavery has affected them, it's that they think slavery has affected them. It's like some kind of weird mass delusion that you and people like you perpetuate. I mean, for fuck's sake, 8 generations ago, about the same amount of time, my ancestors were stealing horses and sheep. And you know what? Doesn't fucking bother me. Why? It happened 8 fucking generations ago. 8 fucking generations ago. I mean, that'd be your... what, great grandparents.
We can't keep ignoring and mythologizing slavery just because facing it head on makes us feel bad. Part of the healing comes from facing it.
You know what I think, Francesca? What my opinion is, Francesca? I think you can't face modern slavery. You don't like to acknowledge it because it challenges your idea about how oppressed by slavery you happen to be. Because it really exists, and the slavery that oppresses you does not exist. Not anymore. It existed at one time. A long fucking time ago. It doesn't oppress you now because it doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. Slavery is not legal anywhere in the world. Well, chattel slavery isn't legal anywhere in the world anymore. And that's the kind of slavery that you're talking about. You just can't face it because it just challenges how oppressed you are by society, how oppressed you are by your fancy hair, your TV show, super oppressive, the branded deal with MTV you have. Oh, how oppressed you are. Fuck. I need a drink. You know what? I'm just joking. I've been drinking this whole time.